Last time, we talked about how our in-depth exploration and study of the US EP-3 electronic reconnaissance aircraft gave us a profound understanding of electronic warfare technology. It's not that we didn't have electronic reconnaissance aircraft before we did. For instance, in 1992, we specially modified a Tu-15 to perform electronic intelligence gathering missions. The Tu-15 is a passenger aircraft model produced by Russia. Its performance is pretty average. The engines and reliability are lacking, with frequent accidents. We didn't really want it, but in the 1990s, when the US imposed another round of sanctions on China, we couldn't buy better planes, so we had to make do. At the time, our understanding of electronic reconnaissance was still somewhat limited. We mainly focused on observing the enemy's force deployments, similar to how in ancient times, scouts would report back on enemy positions. Whether in ancient or modern warfare, reconnaissance is always crucial to understanding the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. Once you know the enemy's troop deployment and can distinguish between real and fake movements, you'll be in a much stronger position to avoid losing the battle, whether in ancient times or today. So, we approached electronic reconnaissance from this traditional mindset. In 1992, we installed a synthetic aperture radar on the underside of that Tu-154. What is a synthetic aperture radar? It's actually quite advanced, but I won't go into the technical principles here. Just think of it as a camera, but instead of capturing light, it receives electromagnetic signals. This synthetic aperture radar emits electromagnetic signals, and by receiving the reflected signals, it can convert them into images. Essentially, it's like a radar camera. Does that make it easier to understand? My program is all about making complex technical concepts instantly understandable for you. Based on these technical principles, the synthetic aperture radar can take pictures of enemy targets without being affected by weather or lighting conditions, producing relatively clear images, and it can even capture some underground facilities. Before the US EP-3 reconnaissance aircraft was forced down, we always believed that our Tu-154 electronic reconnaissance aircraft was relatively advanced and kept it under wraps. But after we got a glimpse of some of the EP-3's technology, we were stunned. It turned out that we had been heading in the wrong direction. Our understanding of electronic reconnaissance was too limited. We were still stuck at the level of photographing enemy military bases, focusing on how to make the images clearer. Meanwhile, the USS EP-3 was conducting comprehensive surveillance. For instance, the EP-3 had a database that, through its electronic surveillance system, could monitor communications over a long period, creating a personal profile for each monitored individual. The voice print analysis was so detailed that it could determine whether a person had a cold. From the voice print, it could even deduce whether the person had been staying up late or had been drinking the night before. And this database was so advanced that, for example, if the EP-3 reconnaissance aircraft intercepted the phone signal of a captain while in the air, it could quickly pop up the captain's photo on the screen. All of his historical information would appear as links beneath the photo, available for immediate review. The system could also indicate how the captain had been feeling recently, whether he was in good health, and based on his communication history, even assess his family situation, where his children went to school, and his usual hangouts. All of this information was automatically compiled and displayed in real time, without any need for manual sorting. So the personnel on the EP-3 could casually listen in on the captain's phone conversation while looking at his personal photo, smiling all the while. They could even know how he was feeling recently and what decisions he might make next. At this point, some people might say, "You're exaggerating, that was 20 years ago. What you're describing sounds too futuristic, but the information I'm sharing is verifiable." Former U.S. intelligence officer James Bamford wrote a book after retiring, called Body of Secrets. In his book, he described some of the technical details of the EP-3 reconnaissance aircraft. Let me read a few excerpts from the book. The National Security Agency (NSA) has extensive files on those they monitor. Sometimes, the operators would laugh at the photos of the people they were listening to. The operators could even tell if the person they were monitoring had a cold. His book also mentioned that the aircraft was equipped with the most advanced signal interceptors and enhanced sensor systems developed by U.S. intelligence agencies. These were designed by top intelligence and computer experts in the U.S., integrating tactical communication, electronic resources, special signal processing, and utilization systems. This allowed for seamless processing of the collected intelligence, greatly enhancing the ability to process intercepted electronic signals during reconnaissance. The book also mentioned that the EP-3 usually flew along the borders of the airspace of the countries it was monitoring, collecting electronic signals emitted by various radio devices within their territory, such as radio stations, telegraphs, walkie-talkies, and mobile phones. What's remarkable about the EP-3 is that it can establish an audio database of the opposing country's combat pilots and commanders through long-term monitoring. This database can be used to analyze the command habits, reaction times, decision-making processes, and even the personal characteristics of enemy personnel. It's terrifying to think about this electronic reconnaissance aircraft flying a few circles around your country is like taking your pulse, leaving no secrets hidden from the U.S. whether in war or diplomatic struggles. If the U.S. has taken your pulse, can you really win? So, this EP-3 reconnaissance aircraft opened a window for us and pulled our research direction back on track from the wrong path. After this incident, our leaders remembered someone, Dr. Wang Xiaomo. Why? Because he had already proposed this theory 10 years earlier. However, due to the limitations of the time, his theory wasn't fully clear. Dr. Wang Xiaomo's main research focus back then was on early warning aircraft, not electronic reconnaissance aircraft. But he proposed an important theory: in future electronic warfare, whether it's electronic reconnaissance aircraft or early warning aircraft, the real core technology lies in the collection and transmission of signals. Think about it, what's the principle of radar? Isn't it about sending out signals and then receiving the reflected signals? If the signals you emit are strong enough and your receiver is sensitive enough, then the performance of your radar will naturally be good. The same applies to electronic reconnaissance aircraft. When monitoring, the main component used is the receiving module. If you're interfering with the enemy, then it's the transmitting module. So, the true core technology of electronic warfare lies in the transmitting and receiving modules. This might sound a bit technical, and not everyone might understand it. But I'll try to explain it in simple terms so that every listener can understand. So back in 1993, Professor Wang Xiaomo firmly advocated that China should invest heavily in developing the receiving and transmitting modules. At that time, active electronically scanned array radar technology was still just a concept and had not been realized yet. The world's first early warning aircraft to use an active phased array radar was Israel's Falcon. I believe it was around 1990 when it first started test flights. At that time, Professor Wang Xiaomo advised the top leadership that if we were to procure an early warning aircraft, we should go for Israel's Falcon. The Russian A-50, which used mechanically scanned radar, should no longer be considered. Even though the top leadership didn't fully understand the concept of active phased array radar that Wang Xiaomo was proposing, they trusted him and adopted his suggestion. So in March 1993, China and Israel held talks in Beijing to jointly study the design of an early warning aircraft. Now, everyone, listen closely. We didn't just buy Israel's Falcon. The design of the early warning aircraft was a joint effort between China and Israel. It was co-developed and co-designed by both countries. Unlike India, which just takes money to another country to buy something off the shelf, that's not our style. Some people might ask, but didn't the Falcon early warning aircraft already undergo test flights in Israel in 1993? Why did we still need to study it? Well, it's not that simple. Although the Falcon tested in Israel used active phased array radar with excellent performance, its design had flaws. It could only scan a 260-degree range, leaving significant blind spots. During these negotiations, Professor Wang Xiaomo proposed his own technical solution, which later became the famous Third Plan. This plan involved using Russia's Il-76 as the carrier aircraft and installing the world's largest dorsal radar antenna. By raising the radar antenna, the blockage of the radar beam by the aircraft's tail fin could be reduced, enabling 360-degree full coverage with active phased array radar. This proposal shocked the Israeli technical team and earned China the qualification to co-develop and research the Falcon early warning aircraft with Israel. You see, if you don't bring something valuable to the table, others won't even consider collaborating with you. It's just like doing business. Money alone isn't enough. You need to show irreplaceable value. If all you have is money, it won't work. There are plenty of people with money in this world, especially in the arms market. It's not just about having money, you might not even be invited to play. Take India, for example. They're always generous when buying weapons, but they've never participated in frontline research and development. So, to sum it up in one sentence, what's the most valuable thing in this world? It's talent. Now, let me tell you, I don't have a high opinion of Israel. They're nothing but shrewd businessmen. Back then, they had a lot on their mind. They didn't just want to make money off us. They also wanted to take advantage of our technical solutions for free. Negotiations dragged on for 2 years, and it wasn't until 1996 that things were finalized. The contract was set up so that the Falcon early warning aircraft, co-developed by China and Israel, would be funded by China, and the core transmit-receive TR modules would be produced by China. Some people in China at the time didn't understand this. They asked, "We're already paying for it, so why do we still have to do the work for them?" Professor Wang Xiaomo explained it like this: the more work we do, the more we benefit. It's okay to buy the first early warning aircraft, but if we have to buy a second one, that's a dangerous situation. So from the very first one, we need to learn and work alongside them to ensure we're developing in parallel. He also argued that we should not only spend more money but also take on more work. Essentially, the more we do, the better. Now, this way of thinking is something other countries just can't replicate. If it were another country, they'd probably think, "I'm paying for this, and now I have to do the work too." That doesn't make any sense, but we're different. We paid the money and did the work too. Why? It's all about learning the skills. Under Professor Wang Xiaomo's insistence, China sent a team consisting of on-site management and on-the-job trainees to Israel. They even actively sought out tasks, like helping the Israeli side manufacture the radome and the TR module housings. We took on the full set of tasks. However, because our technology was so outdated at the time, we made over 500 sets of TR modules and housings, all of which were rejected by the Israelis. They were furious. Later, the Israelis found out that the TR module housings we made were hand-finished. Do you know what that means? It means that our machinists were using files to slowly shape each piece by hand. Just think about it, our weapons manufacturing standards were that far behind, especially in terms of precision and standardization. After realizing this weakness, Professor Wang Xiaomo established China's first complete design team with strong state support. They built Asia's largest anechoic chamber, the largest autoclave, clean production workshops, and a TR production line. Later, Professor Wang Xiaomo said that what we did back then was like creating a backup plan for early warning aircraft development. This shows just how smart he was, always keeping a backup plan. As it turned out, Professor Wang was right. In April or May of 2000, Israel's foreign minister secretly visited India and, for $1.38 billion, sold the Falcon early warning aircraft, which was co-developed by China and Israel, to India behind our backs. After India agreed to the purchase, Israel informed the Chinese government in July that they were terminating the contract. This left the Chinese side in shock. We were almost done building the aircraft, and suddenly the contract was terminated. Professor Wang Xiaomo even went to Israel personally to negotiate with them, but it was no use. In the end, Israel paid us less than $400 million as compensation, and that was it. This situation shows that you can't rely on anyone else. You have to rely on yourself. That's when Professor Wang Xiaomo's foresight really came into play, as we were able to activate the early warning aircraft backup plan. You see, we could already produce the core components of the active phased array radar, so why should we be afraid of you tearing up the contract? At that time, after our assessment, we had mastered about 80% of the active phased array radar technology, and we could produce almost all the necessary components on site. So, when Israel unilaterally terminated the contract, it completely fueled our determination to develop our own early warning aircraft. As a result, in December 2000, just 5 months after Israel terminated the contract, we officially launched the development of our own KJ-200 early warning aircraft. At this point, Professor Wang Xiaomo proposed that the chief designer for the KJ-200 should be a young person who understands both technology and business, and should not be older than 40 years. As a result, Lu Jun, who was then the deputy director of the 38th Institute and only 36 years old, was appointed as the chief designer of the KJ-200. The following year, In 2001, the KJ-200 successfully completed its test flight. See how fast that was? That's just how we Chinese operate, always prepared for the unexpected. If anyone thinks they can choke us off, they're wrong. Now that we've come this far, you should understand why China's active phased array radar is now in a globally unrivaled position. The roots of this lie here. Our active phased array radar didn't just appear out of nowhere, it has a clear origin. Now, let's dispel a myth. Around the early 2000s, when the internet was still in its early, chaotic stages, rumors were rampant. And these rumors often had reasons behind them. One such rumor claimed that Israel had a very good relationship with us, that they were very grateful to us for saving Jewish people during World War II, and that the Falcon early warning aircraft wasn't sold to us purely because of American obstruction. The rumor goes on to say that Israel really wanted to sell it to us, but when they couldn't, they gave us the core technology of the Falcon early warning aircraft, which allowed China to eventually develop its own early warning aircraft with the phased array radar. You see how disgusting that story is. Just hearing the tone, you can guess who made it up. Without hearing the real story, many people might not believe that China's active phased array radar is the best in the world. We fully utilized the Falcon incident to place ourselves in the first tier of developing active phased array radar early warning aircraft. Our starting point was incredibly high. Just having an active phased array radar is impressive enough, but our starting point was the airborne version of the active phased array radar. What's the difference between the airborne version and the regular version? It's like buying an iPhone 14. The airborne version is like the iPhone 14 Pro Max, the sea-based version is like the iPhone 14 Pro, and the land-based version is like the iPhone 14 regular version. Don't underestimate the regular version, it's still an iPhone 14, so you can see how high our starting point was. At this point, attentive listeners might notice something. The EP-3 electronic reconnaissance plane collision incident and the successful test flight of our KJ-200 prototype happened on the same timeline. This brings us back to the earlier discussion. When we realized from the EP-3 incident that our electronic reconnaissance aircraft research direction was wrong, who did we think of first? Professor Wang Xiaomo and his research team. Whether it's an electronic reconnaissance aircraft or an early warning aircraft, the main core issues boil down to two parts: the aircraft as a carrier and the transmit-receive components. In simple terms, it's about the active phased array radar. So we decided to transfer some of the technical details from the KJ-200 to the electronic reconnaissance aircraft, achieving a dual approach of developing both electronic reconnaissance aircraft and early warning aircraft. At this point, I think it's necessary to talk about the performance indicators of the KJ-200 early warning aircraft. The KJ-200 uses the Russian IL-76 as its carrier, equipped with a dish-shaped antenna and an active phased array radar. It's a purely domestically produced radar, with the aircraft featuring a supercomputer control station and software capable of 360-degree full coverage. It's particularly good at detecting high-speed aerial or maritime targets. It not only has early warning capabilities but also reconnaissance capabilities, with powerful functions for collecting electronic intelligence, electromagnetic intelligence, and radio intelligence. In other words, the KJ-200 is not just an early warning aircraft but also a powerful electronic reconnaissance aircraft. The specific parameters of the KJ-200 are as follows: a maximum range of 5,500 kilometers, a maximum takeoff weight of 175 tons, a wingspan of 50 meters, a length of 46 meters, a flight endurance of 12 hours, the ability to refuel in midair, a detection range of 470 kilometers, a high-altitude detection range of 1,200 kilometers, and the ability to simultaneously track 60 to 100 targets. The radar system on this KJ-200 early warning aircraft was developed by the Nanjing Research Institute of Electronic Technology, and its performance far surpasses that of mechanical scanning radars. At that time, and even now, almost all the early warning aircraft in the world still use mechanical scanning radars. This includes the American EP-3 early warning aircraft and the Russian A-50 early warning aircraft, none of which have achieved active phased array radar. But our KJ-2000, as early as 2002, had already achieved active phased array radar capabilities, and not just any radar, but a 360-degree active phased array radar. So there's no need to compare its specific performance with American systems. They're not even in the same league. The American system is like a slingshot, while ours is like a rifle. Both can shoot birds, but the effect is different. Ours can not only shoot birds but also people. Now, some might ask, what is an active phased array radar, and how is it better than mechanical radar? This is quite complex, but let me explain it in simple terms, something only I can do. Mechanical radar, as everyone knows, involves the radar antenna rotating in circles, constantly scanning and emitting electromagnetic signals, then receiving them. The image you see is a two-dimensional picture. When it detects an enemy target, it shows up as a dot on the radar. Whether it's flying left or right, or its speed, mechanical radar can't directly detect that. You'd need to calculate its movement over time, like how far it moves in a second, to figure it out. But an active phased array radar is different in appearance and function from mechanical radar. It's like the compound eyes of a dragonfly, composed of multiple modules. Each module can both emit and receive signals without needing to rotate. With the same power, an active phased array radar can detect much farther and provides a three-dimensional image. It can monitor a target's altitude, speed, and direction in real time. It also has a rapid scan capability, which means it can focus the radar beam on a single point, like staring at one specific spot. Additionally, it has powerful electronic countermeasures, similar to the functions of an electronic reconnaissance aircraft, to interfere with the enemy. Another feature is its resistance to jamming. It's almost impossible to jam it, according to years of tracking reports by Jane's Defense Weekly and Han River Defense Review. The conclusion is that China's KJ-200 early warning aircraft's performance fully surpasses the American E-3 early warning aircraft. And this was our level back in 2004. At that time, we were somewhat overconfident. Our next goal was to miniaturize the early warning aircraft with the KJ-200. Some people might ask, why develop the KJ-200 when we already have the KJ-200? You have to understand, the KJ-2000's platform is the Russian Il-76 aircraft, and we don't have that many Il-76s. We only have 4 Il-76s, and they were purchased second-hand. Without solving the platform problem, we'd always be vulnerable to supply chain issues. China is vast, and relying on just 4 KJ-2000s is definitely not enough. Keep in mind, the U.S. has over 33 early warning aircraft, and each of their aircraft carriers is equipped with a carrier-based early warning aircraft. Even Russia has 25 early warning aircraft, so we had to come up with a solution. That's when we set our sights on our Y-8 transport aircraft, thinking about whether we could modify it to carry the KJ-2000's technology. Although it's smaller, at least it's usable, and in case of war, it could be fully domesticated, meaning we wouldn't fear a war of attrition. The idea was good, but you had to look at whether the Y-8 could handle it. The Il-76 has a maximum takeoff weight of 190 tons and a payload capacity of 50 tons, while the Y-8's maximum takeoff weight is only 60 tons, with a payload capacity of 20 tons. So, transferring the active phased array radar from the KJ-200 to the Y-8 platform was almost impossible. Therefore, a redesign was necessary. China's approach is incredibly bold. We developed a balance beam strategy on this relatively small aircraft. What is the balance beam strategy? It involves designing the radar antenna like a balance beam and attaching it to the belly of the Y-8. Though it sounds simple, it resulted in over 80% of the aircraft being redesigned. To carry this active phased array radar, we had to replace the Y-8's engines with the WJ-6C engines. The original WJ-6 engines had a power output of 4,000 horsepower, but after switching to the WJ-6C, the power increased to over 5,100 horsepower. The fuel tanks were also upgraded, extending the range from 3,000 kilometers to over 5,000 kilometers. The test flight was successful in October 2005, and the aircraft was delivered to the military in January 2006. However, because the aircraft used a balance beam radar design, it had significant blind spots and couldn't conduct 360-degree searches. Additionally, due to the limited space inside the Y-8, it couldn't house as many control terminals, which significantly weakened the KJ-200's command capabilities compared to the KJ-200. Overall, it was far from perfect. Our researchers, always striving for perfection, couldn't rest until the issues were resolved. But then, disaster struck. On June 3, 2006, at 1:30 p.m., a team of 34 top experts in early warning aircraft research boarded a KJ-200 for a test flight to address the aircraft's shortcomings and upgrade the technology. Including the 6 crew members, 40 people were on board the small aircraft. Tragically, the plane crashed over Lishan Village, Bodian Town, Guangde County, Wancheng City, and Hui Province, killing everyone on board. This was the greatest loss in China's aerospace history, the Anhui Guangde 6.3 air disaster. These 34 individuals were our frontline electronic warfare researchers, the youngest only 24 years old. The loss was immense, creating a gap in our electronic warfare expertise that took years to recover from. Now, why did this crash happen? Mainly because the plane was overloaded. Some might wonder why they took such a risk, knowing the danger. It was all to save time and gather all the necessary data in one go, but this led to a tragic mistake. After the crash, higher-ups ordered that from then on, experts from the same field could no longer travel together on the same plane to avoid such catastrophic losses. As for the KJ-200, it was essentially scrapped. Although a few were still used, there were no further upgrades. It wasn't until the new KJ-50 appeared a few years later that we finally achieved full domestic production, solving the problem. However, neither the KJ-200 nor the KJ-50 represents the final form of China's Air Force. Alright, let's end here for now. Next time, we'll discuss the current level of China's electronic warfare capabilities and its main aircraft, such as the J-160, KJ-300, and Y-80W. These aircraft were the main players in the electronic warfare battle in the South China Sea. This battle even disrupted the entire Asia-Pacific region's weather systems. It was truly a clash of titans. Next time, we'll focus on the details of this war.